Hello, I am back for my second video in 1 week, which is insane. I realised in my last video I don't think I talked enough about how passionate I am about what COVID and the pandemic is doing to our mental health. So I wanted to do like another video just really highlighting the impact, and not just the short-term impact of COVID on our mental health, but more of a long-term impact and how that relates to our physical state as well. I'm hoping it's going to be somewhat informative and also a little bit interesting. I'm not going to go into too much of the medical side of it because I want it to be understandable for all people, and I probably don't understand it all myself anyway. So I'm going to discuss here about mental health and physical health. And I'm not just talking about how suicide rates have increased and our short-term mental health. So yes, everyone's more anxious and everyone's a bit more on edge and feeling a little bit low and not really having any direction in life. But I am talking here about how our long-term mental health will affect our long-term physical health. And here we have, and I'm just going to show you here, we have some physical health conditions. And obviously these aren't all of them, but I've named a few of the most common and the most, the ones that cause the most morbidity to people. And by morbidity I mean living with an illness for a length of time whereby it affects your quality of life. So I'm going to compare this here to the other mental health conditions, which I haven't named all of them obviously, but these are the most common ones, and these are two entities which are connected by physicality, by being within the human body, but they are really not seen as equals, and mental health has been completely forgotten in this pandemic, and we've put the physical health of potentially not a large majority of the population over the mental health of all of the next generation, which to me is just truly quite sad. So you might wonder how I've connected these two, and I think it's becoming more apparent over the years how physical and mental health are connected, and it's becoming a more widely accepted model of disease. So I'm going to just talk along with my writing here and hope that I make some kind of sense. And I'd really love it, by the way, if you guys could leave some comments down below and subscribe and like and, all of that. And I'd love to hear what everybody thinks of my videos. And go check out my blog at diariesofadoctor.com if you haven't seen it already. I'll leave the description down below. So I've written out here that's 5 main mental health disorders, and there are obviously others: schizophrenia, bipolar, personality disorders, but I've only written the 5 here. And ED means eating disorders, so anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, and depression, anxiety, probably the most common ones. Addiction, very common but under-recognised. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, so usually for hygiene or for neat and tidiness. So I've written the things in pink here are where I've written what effect the pandemic has had on our mental health. So the first one I've written is lack of socialisation. The second one was fear-mongering, and the third one is avoidance of gyms and exercise. And that one is really important because this is actually what sparked this video. So I started writing this video because I went back to play hockey last night, and Sorry, my computer fan is going crazy because I'm recording and doing the video at the same time. So hopefully you can't hear it in the background. Anyway, so I just found it quite ironic that people were avoiding exercise and gyms because they were worried about COVID. And I think this is all linked to fear-mongering, but by avoiding exercise and gyms, we are, in the longer term, and unfortunately humans don't really think in the long term, but we are in the longer term making ourselves more susceptible to these diseases. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So, socialisation, I've written here about loneliness and isolation, and that's kind of determined by the fact that we have gone into isolation and lockdown. And this is involved around working from home, which removes any kind of desire for us to even want to work, because a lot of our work motivation comes from being around colleagues and socialising. We are also losing touch with what we are doing our work for. So when you're sat at home, you're not really fully seeing the necessity of your work, and you think you're just alone in what you're doing. Socialisation is also a basic human need, like eating, like drinking, and I just can't believe people will say that they don't need to socialise and they're quite happy without it, but those are probably people that live with other people, so they are therefore socialising. Now I've moved on here to avoidance of gyms and exercise, because over time our body will naturally lose muscle mass and bone density, which is how thick our bones are. And I've written here, it looks like a hash sign, and we use that in medicine as the term for fracture. So fracture NOF is a fractured noth, which is a neck of femur, and are really common in elderly people. And unfortunately, a fractured noth, as we call them, is associated with a poor 1 year survival, because by the time you've got to the point where you're going to get a fractured noth, you're not in a good place in terms of your frailty. Also, I have written here about accidentally written 10 years in bed. Well, I meant 10 days in bed. For an older person, I think over 80 or 85, 10 days in bed, not years, equates to 10 years of muscle ageing, and that is not insignificant for somebody who's already frail and has lost 30% of their muscle mass already. So I've filled in a few more. Unfortunately, the colour coding sort of goes out the window here. So addiction, I think there are probably two main ones, and obviously there are things like gambling, but here I've talked about alcohol and smoking. They are almost definitely very under-recognised as addictions, because I think smoking is recognised, but alcohol, I think people don't realise how much they're drinking. And people will say, often when I speak to them as patients, they'll say, oh, well, I don't drink spirits. And often they associate spirits with alcoholics because it's stronger. But actually, ciders and wines and things like that have many more calories, are worse for your overall health, I would say. Unfortunately, somebody rang my phone halfway through this video, so I have filled in the rest of the mind map. As you can see, I'm just showing how all of these link. Eating disorders, anxiety, OCD are all linked. They are different mental health disorders, and this has been exacerbated by fear-mongering in the news, and also a lack of socialisation, because relationships and socialisation relieves our anxiety. And here I've just pointed to NASH, which is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which is another cause of liver disease. You don't have to drink alcohol to get liver disease, but it's all potentially as a result of weight gain, and alcohol can also make us gain weight, and we all know how much more alcohol people have been drinking over lockdown, and we already drink too much as a nation. here I've linked to, so weight gain when you're heavier, your joints and your bones struggle more because you're just a heavier weight, which means over time you can end up getting things like osteoarthritis and osteoporosis, which means your mobility is reduced. It can make you gain more weight, which just is a vicious circle really. And here, so estrogen is secreted or given out by our fat cells, which are called adipose tissue. And it increases our cancer risk, it increases our risk of clots, it increases our risk of strokes. And I'm giving you a very basic summary here because I want to make it as understandable as possible. All in all, these all lead to, in some way or another, physical health effects. And I'm just pointing to here, eating disorders, so usually lead to weight loss, and this leads to decrease in heart muscle mass, which can put us at higher risk of sudden cardiac events or osteoporosis, which again I've spoken previously about low bone density and muscle mass. Cortisol, this is a very important hormone, and I'll put up a little diagram about all the effects of it, but essentially what I'm trying to say is it's all very complicated, but it's also all very simple because... Okay guys, so I want to conclude this video today by just saying that our bodily systems are really complicated, but I think my message is quite simple. What I've hoped to show today is that our mental health really does matter in order to maintain our physical health, and by putting physical health risks of COVID, for example, above our mental health risks, this in the long term is quite a contradictory action. I think both are really intertwined, and people may think that we're protecting the population by putting our lives and socialisation and mental health on hold, but actually I think this is really a short-term achievement with a long-term detriment. I'm going to finish off by saying be safe, but please also remember to be sane.
This is madness. It's madness, I tell you, for the love of God, Monica, don't do it! Thank you.